There's a lot of positive things happening in our province, and immediately near us in Saskatoon, our neighbours to the south, I've invited Chief Darcy of the Whitecap Dakota First Nation to give us some insight not only on the history of how these two founding communities have come together to prosper in a more dignified way and a more unified way, but in terms of a lot of the activity that's happening south of the city and more of a regional nature. Chief Darcy, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Randy, for inviting me here today and just to share a bit of our story from Whitecap. Certainly, as far as Whitecap and Saskatoon go, we have a long-standing history. It goes back to 1882, when a fellow by the name of John Lake was looking for a place to put his temperance colony, sought the advice of Chief Whitecap, and Chief Whitecap picked out the location of which eventually became the city of Saskatoon. In our community, we view Chief Whitecap as a visionary. We always say that he planted the seeds to which would eventually become our primary market. This is a beautiful multicultural city we have in Saskatoon. And so certainly for First Nation communities, you look at the relationship between Whitecap and Saskatoon, still to this day exist as good neighbors, lots of good partnerships, which I'll get into. But there's certainly some differences when it came to the economy itself. For First Nation communities, the Indian Act was not a piece of legislation that was created for us to be a part of the economy. It was actually the reverse. It was created to segregate us from society, keep us out of sight, out of mind, while everyone else around us had the opportunity to build their infrastructure, build their economies, their jobs, and their opportunities, and even their hope. And so it wasn't that First Nations people are lazy. If you go back before European contact, our ancestors were always hardworking. They never stood with their hand out. Everybody had a role to play inside the community. So today, that's the message we've been delivering inside our community. If we truly want to honor our ancestors, we have to be hardworking like they are, which means in modern day context of getting educated, seeking employment, becoming a contributing citizen, and helping to rebuild the nation. And that's what we're doing today. So there has been some positive change, though, when it comes to legislation. A piece of legislation called the First Nation Land Management Act has enabled us to eliminate 25% of the Indian Act and allow us to open our doors for business, create our own land code, our own set of land laws. So we've gone through the process of creating a land use plan, zoning, development standards, and how our land tenure system works. I can compare it to the University of Saskatchewan. The university cannot sell its lands either. But if you go on to Preston Crossing, the big box stores, all the land beneath the big box stores, all still owned by the University of Saskatchewan, and they're all legally surveyed, registered parcels of land, but they're just commercial leasehold interests. So Whitecap has that same system in place. So financial institutions can give mortgages to individuals or corporations. And we also implemented a real property tax as well, because you have to invest in infrastructure, but you also got to take care of that infrastructure and provide service back to those that are paying the real property tax. So we have a real property tax system, but the only difference between us and the city is the city has its own assessors. We actually use SAMA, Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency. So if a business, a corporation, or an individual, has an issue with their assessment, they don't have to come to chief and council. Right. There's a process for redress, right? So sure. They can go right to SAMA. And then we have a competitive mill rate, because we don't want to have a higher mill rate and scare business away, because we want to create an environment that the business community understands and it's seamless. But what it's done for us, it's taken us from a 70% unemployment rate down to a 5% unemployment rate. And we've become a regional employer. And so now, today we have 680 people working in Whitecap, of which 500 commute from Saskatoon on a daily basis. And of those 500 people, we surveyed them, and 240 said they would actually like to reside in Whitecap if there was rental properties or if there was an opportunity for home ownership. And so the challenges there, again, was that we needed to look at addressing affordable housing. So we actually created a first in Saskatchewan where the Saskatchewan Housing Corporation actually invested in an affordable housing project with Whitecap. And it was an apartment building. And so the federal government seen this through the Canada's Economic Action Plan, and we created a second apartment building. And then we created 10 single-family homes, and we got 34 units available for employees. Of course, now there's a wait list for them. But that being said, all of a sudden it creates a new challenge, because the norm on a lot of our First Nation communities is exodus. People want to move to where there's opportunity. It's no different than a small town where there's no business activity going on. People move to urban centers, and that's what was happening. But because there's employment opportunities and people want to move back home, but also a lot of our employees want to be there. So it created some new challenges for us. But again, they're positive. For example, in regards to health. So the current model on reserve is that the federal government gives funding to First Nations, but it's a segregated program again. It's meant for Whitecap members only. So our employees or even the residents that are not Whitecap members couldn't access our health services. So I approached the province and we had a discussion about the fact that these individuals didn't move to the moon. They're still Canadian citizens, they're still Saskatchewan residents, and I can go into any health clinic in Saskatoon and get service. Why can't the reverse happen? Yeah. So we created a partnership with the federal government, the province, and the Saskatoon Health Region, and Whitecap, and collectively we built a new health center, but it's now recognized as a provincial primary health care center. So now all of the residents,
same as everywhere else,
same as everywhere else, and even the neighboring farmer can actually access our health center. The other thing we looked at was education, and you've heard about the education disparity, how First Nations schools are funded less than provincial schools. So we actually ended up, prior to the bill being killed, we actually addressed that issue through a pilot project with the Saskatoon Public School Division. So our school is now part of the Ward 7 of the Saskatoon Public School Division. So all of the second level services, superintendents, education psychologists, we have access to the resource center. All of our professional teaching staff are all employees of Saskatoon Public School Division now. They're still part of STF, so it becomes a very attractive place to work and get the best teachers. Because we only operate a pre-K to 4 school right now, so our grade 5 to 8s get bused into the city, and our high school students get bused into the city. The other issue we've seen is that our grade 5 to 8s, because there's so many of them, they're actually in 3 different schools in the city. So part of the new Stonebridge school that's going to be built in the south end of Saskatoon, Whitecap's actually contributing $2.7 million towards that, because we're represent about 10% of the student body. Right. So going forward, again, it just enhances that partnership. And at the end of the day, what we want to see is the best education for our children, so that they stay in school, and then once they get their grade 12, no one can take it away from them. And there's so many opportunities right now. You look at the demographics in this country, but even in our province, of course, where you have an aging population, a lot of baby boomers are retiring. And there's so much opportunity for the young First Nation population, but they need that education, right? And the human resource skills to access employment and be contributing citizens. And that's what we've been doing, is saying we want to be part of the economy just like anybody else. So that's some of the things we've been doing to date. The other challenge we have is we operate a 22-seat daycare, and it has a wait list right now. And so similarly, we approached the province and the federal government. We talked about how can we open up a daycare that's open to all of not just Whitecap residents, but even our employees as well. And so we're now, it's under construction. We're building a $2 million 56-seat early learning center with $1 million coming from the federal government, $500,000 from the province, $250,000 is a corporate donation from the Bank of Montreal, and $250,000 from Whitecap. And so that'll be opening next year, and it'll operate similar to any early learning center here in Saskatoon as well, because it's be managed through through our partnership with the Saskatoon Public School Division. So those are some of the positive things that are going on in the community.
I think that's important to note, and you touched on that, was that not only in health, but if Whitecap continues to become a major employer in the region, a lot of them are not going to be from Whitecap themselves, so the access for the daycare is a good example. That needs to be first and foremost. It must place a demand for infrastructure, sewer, water, hotels, everything that comes with that.
Yeah, so that we do have plans to expand, but as you said, the other thing we have to do is expand our infrastructure in order for the hotel to be built and our first phase of our business park. And so that's the other thing we approached the federal government and the province in regards to the Building Canada Fund. So the Building Canada Fund, First Nations can't access that program in the past. It's accessible to rural municipalities and cities and towns, and the program is usually a third comes from the province, a third from the feds, and a third from the local jurisdiction. So we went forward and approached the province and said we're prepared to put up our 1/3 like anybody else. We have a land tenure structure. We have real property tax. We're recognized as a regional employer. We need infrastructure. We'd like to access that program. So the Premier actually agreed and assisted in lobbying the federal government. And he spoke with the Prime Minister. I spoke with Minister Valcourt and his counterpart, Mr. LaBelle. And so finally, in last fall's provincial throne speech, they actually mentioned Whitecap in the throne speech and the Building Canada Fund. So we do have an application in the system right now. So if that all goes through, we'll access that program and we'll expand our infrastructure. But again, what it means is an additional 400 jobs to the region once we're done, because we're looking at building the hotel project as well as the first phase of our business park. So more opportunities. And you think about it though, when First Nations are doing well, everyone is doing well, because like I said, 500 people are commuting from Saskatoon daily. So you got 680 people who are purchasing goods and services, right? and they're not dependent on social programs and that. And when you're employed, you're also eating healthier, and that's you're not taking a toll on the health system. So lots of positive things happen when you have a low unemployment rate. And so it's important, I guess, for us First Nation communities to have the access to the same programs that are available to the non-First Nation communities, because it's the government's role is to foster economic activity. And so if they can foster it off reserve, why can't they foster it on reserve? Because our economies are in their infancy, and we want to be part of the economy, and we want to be contributing citizens as well.
And no one's an island. I think that's very important to keep building those linkages, because when you look at the success and the quality of Dakota Dunes and the casino, and all of these other components starting to fall in place, it's great to see the partnerships. Leadership is obviously a very strong component. We have a park named after you. Congratulations on that, by the way. What do you see in the next 3 to 5 years for Whitecap and the area around you?
Well, I think we see continued growth. I think we see continued partnerships and working together, and I also think in the future what you'll see is more private sector working with Whitecap. We do have some. We had signed a couple of non-disclosure agreements for our first phase of our business park, but you're going to start to see that as well, which is good. That's one of the things we said. We don't have to own every business as Whitecap. You know, certainly if there's private sector that wants to get involved and lease the commercial lands from us, we're prepared to look at those options, because at the end of the day, we're still collecting the taxes as well, and the employment's on our lands. But like I said, we have a 5% unemployment rate. We're relying on the city of Saskatoon and the population to come out there and work in Whitecap. But lots of great partnerships here in the city. Even with Saskatoon Fire Department would be another good one, where they provide all of our backup services. They train all of our volunteers. They do all the maintenance on our fire trucks. But the positive thing out of that was one of our volunteers was so inspired, he actually went to Brandon, took the training, and he became the city of Saskatoon's very first First Nation professional firefighter. First fire he goes to, he ends up saving life with one of his colleagues, and he's on the front page of the Star Phoenix. But those are the kind of role models our young people need to see, and if people like the guy's name is Clint Ledoux, if people like Clint Ledoux can do it, so can they. So.
I think it's a wonderful story, and I appreciate you coming down and sharing that with us. And maybe there'll be a time when Whitecap annexes Saskatoon with that kind of growth. It's a great story. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Andy.
Yeah.